Hi, so today we're going to continue talking about arpeggios. This is a continuation on from Arpeggios 1, and if you feel a little bit more comfortable with arpeggios and you've not watched the first video, that's okay, but I'd recommend watching it anyway just to get a bit of context for what I'm going to be talking about today. So, in the first video I talked a lot about how we can practice arpeggios, how we can make them part of our maybe technical routine, just how we can use them to get really comfortable around our instrument. And the use of arpeggios is twofold. It is for your technique, but it's also very useful for getting to know chord changes or to getting to know a tune. I'd say it's so useful actually that I use the methods I'm about to describe to learn pretty much every tune that I ever learn. So first of all, I want to show you first a piece of vocabulary that kind of features arpeggios, just so you can see for yourself what arpeggios look like used in sort of real improvisation. So here's sort of a pretty standard sounding bebop bit of vocabulary, a lick. Now if you look on your worksheet for this video, example 1 will be this very lick, and I want you to just look at it and have a little description of it, see what you can spot in it. So what I spot in it is a D minor 7 in its root inversion, and that's a G7 in its first inversion. It's a little bit of bebop vocabulary, not really an arpeggio, but then, and that's a G7 in its third inversion but going down. And the reason why I can maybe do this, do that kind of fast, although it wasn't so accurate, but doing it kind of fast, the reason why I can do that isn't because I've practiced that lick a lot, it's because I've practiced the arpeggios. So that's exactly why it's good to be comfortable with the arpeggios, because when you're playing a lot of vocabulary, these arpeggios will kind of crop up. So how can we use the arpeggio exercise and the arpeggio ideas in the context of a tune, in the context of practicing changes? For simplicity's sake, I'm just going to make up my own small chord sequence, so I'm not going all the way through 32 bars of a standard. So I'm going to do a 2-5-1 in C major, followed by a 2-5-1 in A flat major. So all the exercises will kind of be over that, but when you practice these, do them over a tune, because you get more variety and there's more interesting and challenging stuff will come up. So let's say you've practiced your standard chords, so you've got all of your minor sevenths, dominant sevenths and major sevenths down in all the different keys, and there's definitely quite a few ways that we can apply these exercises to playing over changes, if that makes sense. And I think the most basic one is just outlining the changes like as sort of flat as you can over this sequence that I've just made up here. So that would involve literally just going up each chord as it comes. There's our D minor 7, our G7, and our C major 7. And then for the next one, B flat minor 7, E flat dominant 7, A flat major 7. Together, that'll sound like this. And I'd recommend, if you can, practicing these in a sort of swing feel, because it's also a good opportunity to get your hands used to playing arpeggios, but in a swing way, in a groovy kind of way, if that makes sense. So we've done that. How can we go further? Well, we talked a little in Arpeggios 1 about how we can go from different inversions of each chord, and use that to kind of get more used to playing each chord. We can do the same thing here. So we say to ourselves strictly, right, I'm going to do that, but I'm going to do it on every inversion. So here it is with first inversion. And I'm not going to do them all, but let's just do it with third inversion just as another example. So you get the idea. So this is one kind of aspect of how we can kind of get through these changes, but because there are a lot more different arpeggios that we navigate, there's a lot more variety in what we can kind of do. So what we can also do is we can do it so that we're always trying to make sure that each arpeggio is close together. Now what do I mean by that? I mean that each kind of inversion that we use, we try and use an inversion for the next chord that comes up that's close to the next one. So for example, let's take this our C major 2-5-1. So let's start root position D minor 7. Simple. But it's quite jumpy and actually a bit uncomfortable musically and sort of technically to then jump up to the next root inversion. We'll get something a lot more smooth and something that resembles a sort of classic jazz bit of language if we go for an inversion that where all the notes are much closer together. So for our next chord, G7, so there's D minor 7, and let's start our G dominant 7th in second inversion. So actually it ends up starting on a concert D, which is the exact same note that our D minor 7 starts on. So already it sounds a lot more musical. Let's go further. If our starting note is D, then the closest note to start our C major 7 on would either be the root, which is just C, or the third, which is E. I'm going to go for the third just because I feel like it's a bit more interesting to try and have less root inversions than is tempting to have. So we go D minor 7 in root inversion, G7 in second inversion, and C major 7 in first inversion. Now if I keep going through the changes of the thing that I've outlined like that, we get something which I think sounds quite nice. I'm going to go on. So there, I'm not doing much more complicated than what we've been doing before. Kind of all the practices led up to this point, but it sounds so much more interesting, and that's where we start to really use our brains to kind of on the fly think of the right inversion to use at the right time, just so it kind of starts to sound musical. And we can do the same for all of this that we've just talked about, but with the arpeggios going down the way. So that's the general idea. Now, what would be quite good to do, and this is kind of ramping up to the next sort of level of difficulty, but using our pattern idea that we came up with. So for those of you who didn't watch the first video, what we do basically is we take the 1, 3, 5, 7 of each chord, and we flip it around so that we do a different order of notes. So let's try 1, 5, 3, 7. This is one of the more simpler reorderings of the notes. So let's just go through the sequence of arpeggios, but using that reordering of notes. And there we are. We're starting to get. I'm feeling like a bit more familiar with this very simple set of changes there. By doing this exercise and trying to challenge my brain to think of a different way to kind of go through it. And then just for fun, let's go through it using this. But let's do it where we keep each inversion as close together as possible again. And this is where the brain starts to have to work quite fast. So. Then maybe I'd do the mirror image coming down if I'm getting a bit too high on the instrument. So you get the idea. I think that's plenty. That's a lot of stuff to kind of digest. But what I'd encourage you to do is just take any kind of tune, any tune that we've worked on in school or any kind of other tune, and take these exercises all the way through the tune, and you'll be so surprised at how comfortable the tune actually becomes. And I encourage you to kind of be creative as well. I've showed you a few different ways, but these are just groundings. You can change the ordering of the notes. You could do 7-1-3-5 if you wanted. Or you could do it in a different time signature, or you could, there are endless possibilities of interesting stuff that you can do. So yeah, hopefully that's helpful. That kind of concludes our 2 arpeggio classes. Again, any questions, please don't hesitate to get in touch. I'm sitting in my house with nothing to do. I'm sure you are as well, so I'm happy to answer any questions that you may have. Yeah, thank you very much for watching, and happy practicing.